Hey everybody, it's Christian here, and today I'd like to show you my brand new Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster in my home lab. I know I've made many videos about Kubernetes in the past, and it's not the first cluster that I've built, but it is the first one that is not running on virtual machines. Instead, I've installed it on 3 Raspberry Pis that I've mounted with a cool new case into my server rack. To be honest, that was quite a challenging project for me because I didn't have that much experience with the Raspberry Pis before, and I've tried out a couple of new things in this project that were completely new to me. For example, using a different installation procedure for Kubernetes using the Ketchup tool. Yes, it's called Ketchup. And a super cool load balancer called KubeVIP, which makes the network traffic routing to Kubernetes super easy. Of course, I'd like to share this all with you, and I go in a bit more detail about the setup so that you can easily follow along and learn how to build such a Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster yourself. I also like to mention the sponsor of today's video called Kestra, which is a nice automation tool that I've used in this project to automatically provision the Raspberry Pis with an Ansible playbook and some Terraform code, but more about that later in the video. Let's first get started and let's talk about the Kubernetes cluster and why the hell did I even start this project. Okay, so let me go in a bit more detail. What was the actual plan behind this project and what is currently running in my home lab? Because some of you might know that I'm already running a Kubernetes cluster in my home lab, and I'm mostly running everything on virtual machines on my Proxmox hypervisor. You guys know I just love Proxmox. It's great for deploying virtual machines, and so I have created many virtual machines for different types of workload tasks. And I also have deployed a Kubernetes cluster using K3s. I, by the way, will link you the old video in the description down below, so there I talk in a bit more detail about how K3s works and why you should actually deploy a 3-node cluster and so on. And as you can see, like most of the production workloads is somehow fractured across the different types of virtual servers and deployments. And I wanted to change this entire infrastructure a bit because I wanted to go a bit away from this fractured deployment stuff, and instead the new plan is to deploy an entirely new Kubernetes cluster running on 3 Raspberry Pis that are meant to be much more power efficient than my current Proxmox cluster. And there are also some future projects that I haven't really deployed yet, such as my self-hosted Git platform, maybe with GitLab or Git. We will see which one might be better for that. And I also want to have a 4th Raspberry Pi that is not included in this cluster, but is mainly for IoT and backup stuff. So this allows me to have a much more centralized and high available structure for all of my applications I want to deploy in my home lab. The first technology that I'm going to use to run the Kubernetes cluster will be K3s. I know many people in the comment section of my other videos have talked about Talos Linux and Cedar Labs, but honestly, I think I'm just going to use what I'm familiar with and what I think has currently the best community support and where there is enough content around. So I think for running my production Kubernetes cluster, I'm just going to focus on K3s. It has been super reliable on all of my other machines. It is a very lightweight and simple way to run Kubernetes that is also built for IoT and edge computing. So this should be just perfect for running on a Raspberry Pi because it doesn't consume a lot of system resources and so on. As for the architecture, I've chosen the installation procedure to build a high available Kubernetes cluster with an embedded database, because one of the goals of this project was to build a cluster for all 3 Raspberry Pis, and that should run independently of any other backend systems or any other devices in my home labs. Even when I shut down any other machine, I shut down my Proxmox device, my firewall, and anything like this, this Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster should still be functional. It should have all the data. It should be able to run all of the workloads, and even without any other system to be in place. Just know that there are many other possible scenarios for deploying Kubernetes using K3s. There is an external database that you can use. There's also a single server setup with an embedded database that you could use. There are many other scenarios. I think I've covered them in my older K3s videos, so check this out if this is interesting to you. But for this project, I've chosen the K3s high available setup with an embedded database to make this cluster independent of anything else. The next big topic is how do you route the network traffic to the physical devices in the Kubernetes cluster, because in my last K3s video, if you remember, I've used an external load balancer that was running on my Sophos XG firewall. So load balancing is a big topic in Kubernetes, and I found this application. This is called KubeVIP, and this provides a Kubernetes cluster with a virtual IP and a load balancer for both the control plane and also for Kubernetes services of the type load balancer without relying on external hardware